This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
World leaders hold talks on the G7 sidelines ahead of Sunday's formal discussions in France. In Sudan, al-Bashir's defense appeals for his release on bail. And Ghanaian artists display their work at an exhibition launched to support creatives. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, Chinese carmaker BAIC explores the African market. And in sports, Usain Bolt's 200-meter record falls at the IAAF Diamond League in Paris. We start the program in Europe, where formal talks at the G7 summit in France are getting underway. On Saturday, world leaders attended a welcome dinner in the southern French resort of Biarritz and held sideline meetings on global issues. Now, last year's summit ended in disarray as the broad and deep divisions between U.S. President Donald Trump and the other 6 leaders were laid bare. The U.S. president also refused to sign the traditional joint communique. This year's gathering is also taking place in a tense atmosphere. French President Emmanuel Macron has already tried to lower expectations on what will be accomplished by the end of the summit. Stefan de Vries reports.
The leaders of 7 of the world's largest economies have many topics to discuss here in Biarritz over the next couple of days. The summit started with a series of bilateral meetings, and Donald Trump had a private lunch with French President, the host Emmanuel Macron. And at the beginning of the lunch, the American president was pretty optimistic about the outcome of this summit.
So far, so good. The weather is perfect. The guest is fantastic. Everybody's getting along, and I think we'll accomplish a lot this weekend, and I look forward to it. And thank you for having me.
Initially, the main topic was supposed to be the fight against global inequality. Well, that has completely been overshadowed by the climate change, the fires in the Amazon rainforest, but more importantly, by the escalating trade wars between the US and China. There will not be a joint declaration, contrary to the tradition of the G7 group. So the summit will end on Monday, and then Emmanuel Macron hopefully will have avoided an all-out trade war. But things are not looking good. We will know more on Monday. This is Stefan de Vries in Biarritz in the southwest of France for CGTN.
Let's go live now to CGTN's Stefan de Vries. He joins us on the line from Biarritz in France with the latest on the G7 meeting. Stefan, we know, of course, that today is the day of the official important meetings. Just talk us through what is taking place so far at the G7 meeting.
Well, the dinner, we just saw the images, lasted 3 hours last night. It was a cordial meeting, but the leaders got up early this morning with the first roundtable meeting. That one has just finished here in Biarritz, and bilateral meetings are underway. And about an hour from now, the G7 leaders will be joined by international organizations and also with African leaders. 5 African government leaders are attending this G7 meeting from Burkina Faso, Egypt, Rwanda, Senegal and South Africa. That's for the program. This morning, the G7 leaders also gave Macron the mission to talk to Iran to avoid any further escalations and to prevent Iran developing nuclear arms. So, the leaders will have lunch now, and then the rest of the day will be all talks all day long, probably late into tonight.
No doubt a busy and comprehensive agenda for the world leaders. But of course, 2 key issues that seem to be taking prominence at the moment: global trade tensions and Britain's exit from the EU. How do you think those issues might be addressed or even resolved?
Well, there was an interesting development this morning indeed when the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson had a bilateral meeting with Donald Trump, and Johnson made it clear once again that Britain and the European Union are in favor of trade peace and a free market. And, well, that was a surprising thing. Johnson's words may have had some effect on the American president, because when Trump was asked if he was rethinking his decision to escalate trade tariffs against China, Trump replied, yeah, sure, why not? I have second thoughts about everything. So that was not expected yesterday. Regarding Brexit, well, Johnson has said again yesterday that the deal with the European Union is not possible if the Europeans want to keep the Irish backstop, but that is something that is not negotiable for the Europeans. So tensions are high there as well. There are only 66 days left to find a solution, but European capitals now think that a no-deal Brexit will be the most likely outcome.
Of course, some very contentious issues on the agenda. Thank you so much, Stefan de Vries, joining us there on the line from Biarritz in France. Now, of course, as Stefan mentioned, there are 5 African countries that have been invited to participate in the G7 summit. For a look at Africa's participation, we're now joined by Dr. Ziad Akel, a political analyst and researcher at the Al-Ahram Center for Security and Strategic Studies in Cairo, as well as Professor Patrick Bond, a political economic analyst from the School of Governance at Wits University in Johannesburg. Professor Bond, let me start with you. 5 African countries invited to this year's G7 summit. What message is Africa taking to these world leaders?
Well, I fear it's going to be a fragmented one, and there are so many concerns ranging from the climate catastrophe that continues. The big Brazil fires are actually outnumbered by the fires in Angola and Central African Republic. The Central African rainforests deserve just as much attention because as they are also under threat. And then, of course, it's security. The Trump AFRICOM, the Africa Command of the United States, continues sometimes working with, sometimes against the countries in the Sahel, and Senegal and Burkina Faso will be concerned there. And then, of course, it's world economy, because Trump and now Boris Johnson really threaten stability. And with the China-US trade war still unresolved, with China amping it up this last week, with Trump a little bit vague but still maintaining, the most hostile posture, this will also adversely affect Africa. But, Cyril Ramaphosa from South Africa has already said he's in France to try to get more investment benefits for South Africa. That's why I say I fear it might be fragmented along issues and different countries' interests.
And indeed, this year's agenda seems like it will be overshadowed by world economic issues and geopolitical tensions. Dr. Akel, coming to you, how are the G7 leaders likely to promote Africa's interests in the summit?
Well, I believe that, first of all, it's always a pleasure to be here. I agree with what your respectable guest said. But we have to take into notice that it is the first time for Egypt to be the head of the African Union, and it has been developing a strategy for the international interests of Africa within the coming years. And what is going to happen in order for Africa to benefit from the summit is actually the sort of files that Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will raise within this file, not only as the President of Egypt, but also as the head of the African Union. There are files that have to do with security, with defense, with infrastructure and partnerships within infrastructure investments, and with countering terrorism and with illegal immigration. These 5 files make Africa a central figure within international politics within the few coming years. It's about basically how to build alliances around these files, how to make these files not only matter for Africa, but also matter for the rest of the international community.
Absolutely, and that is the key question. How do we make Africa's agenda, Africa's interests relevant on the global stage? Professor Bond, what discussions are likely to touch on Africa at all during the summit?
Well, Emmanuel Macron, the host in France, wanted to have a discussion about inequality, and things like gender inequality, Africa's development, were sort of brushed aside by Trump and his close colleagues like the economic advisory team, the security advisory team, because what they really, I think, treat Africa in a tokenistic way as not terribly important. And for them, I think it's been much more about getting their alliances together within the G7 against China. And of course, the China-Europe connection gets ever tighter with the Belt and Road Initiative ending up in Europe. So actually, I think Africa is actually falling off this map because Macron was sort of sidelined by the crises Donald Trump is creating. And I think actually we should all be much more aware of the danger of a deglobalization as a result. And is our reliance upon the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act too great? They were just renegotiating that a few weeks ago, and in 2025 it will end. Our country is too much aligned to the United States with the Donald Trump. He may well be re-elected, which is certainly not in Africa's interest.
Well, just coming back to you, Dr. Akel in Cairo, as you heard Professor Bond saying there, it seems like Africa's agenda might be sidelined this time at the G7 summit. And it begs the question then, to what extent the G7 can actually influence global development without Africa? In fact, what role does Africa play?
I think that the idea of excluding Africa from international development is becoming very passé within political science, even in the literature. Today, you have the biggest potential in the world in Africa. You have different parties. You have the Americans, you have the Russians, you have the Western Europeans, the Chinese, the Japanese, even the Australians interested in investment in Africa because they believe in the amount of potential that the continent has and the fact that it still has a lot of opportunities that are still misused or maybe even unutilized or underestimated. So the idea of having a strategy for international development without Africa being a part of it will be very incomplete. Therefore, it is actually the role of the African leaders to take all they can out of this fact that all the countries of the world are started to notice how Africa is becoming the new platform of international investment.
And Professor Bond, coming back to you finally, we know, of course, that this year's summit will end without a communique. But what resolutions do you see emerging by the conclusion of this summit, and how might they affect Africa?
Again, I use the word tokenistic because I think the G7 treats Africa as the West always has, neo-colonially. And I do want to maybe disagree with your other guests because I'm Afro-optimist from below for movements for democracy in Sudan and Algeria this year that were quite successful, for movements that are still bubbling up. But from above, I'm much more pessimistic. And the reason is simple, that we are going over an economic cliff quite soon. It might be because of Brexit, it might be because of debt problems. Africa is not going to be very important in this. The last time we saw this, 2008-9, commodity prices plummeted because of the lack of world demand. I think that's the big danger. We have not got off Africa becoming, for the West mainly, a primary export supplier of raw materials. We've never developed that industrial base. Until that happens, I think the G7, and particularly Donald Trump, who has no regard and is a profound racist for Africa, I think we are tokenistically considered and just brought in as icing.
Well, Professor Patrick Bond, thank you so much for sharing your views with us there from Johannesburg, and indeed a big thank you as well to Dr. Ziad Akel joining us from Cairo. And turning to some other news now, well, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari is traveling to Japan today, and that's to attend the 7th Tokyo International Conference on African Development. This year's theme is Africa and Yokohama, sharing passion for the future. Among other things, Buhari is expected to deliver an address on Nigerian and Japanese relations. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more.
Information of President Buhari's trip to Japan was made known in a statement released by presidential spokesman Femi Adesina. The conference, scheduled to begin August the 28th, would hold in the city of Yokohama. It will focus on economic transformation and improvements in areas of business and institutions through private investments and innovations. Buhari would honor invitations to a state banquet and a reception at the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. He'll also meet with chief executives of Japanese businesses with huge investments in Nigeria. He's expected to push for wider assistance in various sectors.
Japan is known for very, very good developments in areas of technology, and that is what Africa needs right now. With the spate of events that is taking place in Nigeria, we know that, or we'd expect that he would go there and come up with, agreements or sign contracts that Nigeria as a country will benefit from. I also believe that one of the things he would discuss with the businessmen is how to increase their level of investments in Nigeria.
We all know the problems mutating up against us in Nigeria, majorly security. And we know that Japan is known for high-tech, innovations and all that. So I would expect that that is one of the key things he's going to put on the table for them to come up with, very good high-tech technology ideas to combat this issue.
The conference was designed to focus the attention of the international community on Africa's developmental issues and mobilize support. Relations between Nigeria and Japan has grown steadily since 1964. Last year, the total trade exchange between both countries hit over $1.1 billion. President Buhari's talks are expected to boost that figure. He returns Saturday, the 31st of August. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
To Sudan now, where the corruption trial of former President Omar al-Bashir continues. The head of the ousted leader's defense committee has said that he will request for Bashir to be released on bail. CGTN's Daniela Pearson has more.
Supporters gathered near the courtroom where the former Sudanese president, Omar al-Bashir, is on trial for corruption. The ousted leader has been charged with the illicit possession of foreign currency and accepting gifts in an unofficial manner.
We asked for him to be released on bail for this case, as this is one of the cases in which the accused can be released on bail. It is a very ordinary case. Our request should be taken into consideration. The request will be brought forth to the judge today.
A police detective told the court that Bashir acknowledged receiving millions of dollars from Saudi Arabia. The 75-year-old Bashir has been held in Khartoum's Kober prison since he was overthrown by the military in April after mass protests against his 30-year rule.
We have also asked that we, the lawyers, meet with Bashir again as he is present here at the Kober prison. We met with him last week and we will meet with him hopefully again next week.
Bashir's trial is seen as a test of how serious authorities are in trying to erase the legacy of his rule. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, a South African company looks to exploit the country's rare earth mineral potential. And Tunisia's National Environment Fund is set to finance pollution prevention.
Economic data out of the country.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Rare earth elements are a group of 17 minerals unique for their magnetic, catalytic and electrochemical properties. They're used in consumer electronic devices, medical equipment and even in the flints of cigarette lighters. Well, a company in South Africa is now looking to exploit the country's rare earth mineral potential. Let's take a look.
In this arid part of South Africa, Trevor Blanche has struck gold. Monazite ore, which contains high grades of neodymium and praseodymium, have been found in the area.
So when you feel it, you can tell it's a special rock.
Steen Kampskral Holdings Limited, where Blanche currently acts as a chairman, has secured licenses to start mining for the rare earth minerals. The minerals are used in modern technologies, such as industrial magnets and hybrid cars.
And the economic significance is great. If you take the market value of the rare earths in this mine that we presently know, it's something like 20 billion rand. It's a very valuable resource for this area, for the community and for the country.
The minerals are valuable on the global market. Last year, China produced the largest share of the so-called tech minerals, producing 120,000 tons in 2018 alone.
South Africa is certainly on par with any other country that would lay claim to being able to supply rare earth elements to meet this increasing demand. So yes, it would mean a great deal to our country to be able to supply, and we are in a position to do so as long as those markets are favorable.
Globally, mines have around 6% or less of rare earths in their ore.
About 14% of this rock is rare earths. That is an extraordinarily high grade, and we don't know anything like it on the planet.
In the meantime, Blanche hopes to build South Africa's underdeveloped rare earth mining industry. Astatal, CGTN.
Tunisia has invested considerable amounts in water pollution reduction through wastewater and industrial pollution abatement projects. Water resources, especially along the coastline, are affected by heavy industry. A national environment fund has been created as a financing instrument to help private industries with pollution prevention. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi has more.
The Coastal Protection and Development Agency at the Tunisian Ministry of Environment has warned against water pollution levels in some regions in the country.
70% of human activity is on the coastline. The hotels, the disinfection plants, the ports, which constitute a source of pollution with hydrocarbons and chemicals. Municipal wastewater discharge, as well as the industrial zones, dump waste in rivers which are connected to the sea.
Data indicate that most water resources are polluted. Tunisian authorities have made major efforts to build wastewater facilities and to prevent water pollution.
The overall quality of water remains at risk and could worsen from industrial, domestic and irrigation expansion, as well as the use of fertilizers in unconventional agricultural activity. The state is committed to improving water quality, but we need help from industrialists.
Experts say many of Tunisia's inland waterways are also affected by heavy industry. Pollutants from industry find their way out into the local environment, impacting local populations before heading out to the sea. Protection of water resources has been included in government priorities and objectives in the water sector strategy developed in 1999. Ali has been fishing in the same area for the past 44 years. The fisherman deplores the fish mortality and the decline in fish populations.
Some species, like crabs, have disappeared and the water colors changed. Fishing in the past was easy and enjoyable. Eating fish or swimming in some areas causes cancer. I've lost many friends in the past 2 decades.
According to the Ministry of Environment, Tunisia is committed to sustainable development and has prepared a national sustainable development strategy. Water quality management functions are currently dispersed among several institutions. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
Kenya's national census kicked off on Saturday with enumerators crisscrossing the country to capture details about Kenya's growing population. For the first time, enumerators are using electronic devices to capture and relay data collected during the survey, which is carried out once every decade. This information is expected to inform the government's future policy decisions.
Sunset marked the beginning of Kenya's 6th national census exercise. With most pubs and other entertainment spots closed, Kenyans headed home to wait for the enumerators, individuals recruited by the government to carry out the 7-day counting exercise. A population census is a process of counting the people in a country at a specific time. Across the country, the over 130,000 enumerators visited homesteads at night when most people were believed to be at home. They set out in groups for security and efficiency.
The Ministry of Interior and Coordination with National Government has collaborated with other agencies, county commissioners, regional commissioners, chiefs, sub-chiefs, and village elders to ensure that there is no destabilization of any kind during this exercise. And indeed, there are also additional police officers that have been deployed to ensure that the exercise goes on smoothly.
It wasn't the first time Peter Serem was participating in the census, but this time things were different. Instead of the old bulky forms, enumerators carried electronic tablets containing a raft of questions for each member of his household.
The last census, the questions were similar to these ones, but I can see these ones are more than, and it is everything in one. I can see how it can help the government how to plan.
The key questions asked include data about age, sex, marital status, births, deaths, migration, and economic activities. This year, for the first time, the country will also count 2 special groups, persons with albinism as well as intersex individuals included as a third gender in the survey.
So we expect we get the exact numbers, even according to like the total population, ethnic groups and all that. And even the outcome, what do they really want to achieve, just apart from knowing our numbers and the population. At least something like economic balance. We need to know how many are employed, and how can they, bring those numbers together or average them. And exactly what will they do even perhaps for the poor people.
Census is not for today. It is for posterity. It is data that the government will utilize to be able to plan for those who are yet to be born for the next 10 years.
The census will continue for a week, with preliminary results expected 3 months after the exercise ends and a final report after a year. It is expected to shed light on the changing face of Kenya while highlighting emerging trends and vital issues to be addressed by the government. The data which the government will collect during the census exercise will provide a valuable well of information about the country's population. This information will then be useful in resource allocation as well as in formulating development plans. Wilkis Anyabo, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
A group of young artists in Ghana have come together to display their best work at an exhibition in the capital, Accra. It's called Variations and seeks to showcase different forms of visual art in the country. CGTN's Nabil Ahmad Rufai reports from Accra.
Ghanaian artist Neil Lante Mills has been practicing his craft for over 30 years. Now, he gets to showcase his works to a large audience.
I focus very much on color. I like to see all the colors in things which people see as flat. People see this, a wall behind you, they see it as white. I like to see it as so many colors coming together to form white. The same way I see life.
This is the first art exhibition held by a group of visual artists in Ghana seeking to promote their works. It comes at a time when many of the artists are not able to hold solo exhibitions due to lack of funds. The focus for this exhibition is on young artists like Mills, who are especially struggling to make it in the industry.
Right now, we do not have an industry. We are working on it. It looks like the system is not supporting the industry yet. But from this exhibition alone, I can see that the young ones are trying very hard to solidify their position in the industry, which is a good thing, because when we were coming up, there was nothing of the sort.
Artists here say there are few galleries and spaces in the country available for them to display their works. They say this makes it difficult to develop a market for their crafts.
30 Ghanaian artists are taking part in this exhibition. They believe by coming together to display their works, it will help attract more local buyers.
When you are down or you are depressed, at least one of the paintings will calm you down. Looking at a particular work for a long time, it takes over your worries and your troubles.
Organizers of the exhibition are looking to create more opportunities for artists in Ghana to showcase their works to a wider audience.
With a lot of artistic events coming up, at least we've seen that some renowned artists have made very bold attempt in trying to project the Ghanaian art beyond our borders. Now, we don't want people to say or tell our narrative. We want to project our narrative ourselves. And the best way is to project the way we work.
Neil Lanter Mills and the other artists here will be showcasing their works for the next 2 weeks. Beyond this exhibition, he says he hopes Ghanaians will begin appreciating the arts better and patronize their works. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
In international news, Hong Kong's respite from violence has been interrupted. Fresh clashes occurred on Saturday as protesters took to the streets demanding the removal of smart lampposts. The police denounced the violence, saying a total of 29 people were detained on suspicion of illegal assembly and attacking officers.
A peaceful calm in Hong Kong was broken. Thousands of demonstrators rallied in Kwun district in the city's east on Saturday, repeating their demand for greater democracy and to protest against the recently installed smart environmental monitoring lampposts. Many voiced privacy concerns regarding the smart lamp surveillance, fearing the mainland authorities were using facial recognition. Protesters here used an electric saw and ropes to bring down the post. They cheered as it toppled over, using umbrellas to hide their identity. What they found inside was equipment from Cisco, an American company. Hong Kong police have said that all along that there is no facial recognition function in the lampposts. Last year, Hong Kong lawmakers approved the lamppost as part of the Smart City project. The Hong Kong regional government said the sensors in the smart lampposts only collect data on traffic, weather, and air quality. The value of each lamppost is reportedly 2.3 million Hong Kong dollars. Saturday's protest also saw the standoff turn into violence. Protesters threw bricks and Molotov cocktails, and the police responded with batons. Tear gas was used for the first time in 10 days after a series of mostly peaceful demonstrations. On the same day, Chief Executive Carrie Lam called for a dialogue, saying that continued confrontation is not the way out. Yang Zhao, CGTN.
Now, the unrest has caused emotional stress, not only for the Hong Kong police, but also their families. CGTN reporter He Weiwei talked to the wife of a police officer who worries her son will be bullied by classmates.
We feel so insecure. At the moment, I dare not let my child say that his father is a policeman. I have a friend whose son was isolated by all his classmates because he said I support the police. He was even removed from the class's WhatsApp group.
The wife agrees to an interview with CGTN.
My heart hurts by asking my son not to talk about his father's job. For a little boy, the police are heroes. I wish I could take my son to a place where he can proudly say, my dad is a policeman.
Take a look at her neighborhood. You will understand why she feels so scared.
I'm now at the entrance of one of dormitory buildings of Hong Kong policemen. And here on the ground, you can see something white here. This is glue. Previously, some radical protesters, they picked up the bricks from the ground and threw them to the police or to the buildings. So local authorities had to put some glue here to stick the bricks to avoid similar attacks.
But more serious threats are just invisible.
Now, more than 1,600 policemen's data has been leaked on the internet. For example, their personal addresses, even the entrance gate passwords. It is terrible. I know a policeman whose phone number was posted online, and he got harassing phone calls every day. It's insulting.
There were 30,000 policemen in Hong Kong. Frequent protests has overwhelmed the force. They were targeted by radical protesters during confrontations. The wife said she was disappointed at what's happening in Hong Kong, but her husband will not give up.
He's still optimistic. He says it's easy to give up, but Hong Kong is our home and we must stick to it.
Nobody knows how long the unrest will last and how much stress the police and their families have yet to suffer. He Weiwei, CGTN, Hong Kong.
Let's take a short break. Your business news up next. Coming up, Chinese carmaker BAIC explores the African market. And Kenya's trade deal with China sees farmers turning to green gold.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Beijing Automotive Industry Corporation, one of China's 5 major car makers, has set up a production line in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa at the Guga Special Economic Zone. The facility will be fully operational by the end of the year, and it's expected that 50,000 vehicles will roll off the line when in full production. The company has a joint venture with a South African funder, the Industrial Development Corporation. Angela Coppola has more.
The Fortune 500 company launched their third vehicle to motoring journalists in August in Johannesburg. The B40 Plus is a four-wheel drive vehicle, and there are plans to produce more passenger vehicles, sport utility vehicles, light commercial vehicles and trucks for the local and export markets.
Bike is an enterprise that emphasizes integrity, attaches importance to sincerity, has strength and seeks innovation with the most open attitudes and thinking. Bike will make unremitting efforts for the mutual benefit and win-win trade and economic cooperation of China and South Africa. Bike will make a greater contribution to initiate the Belt and Road program.
For the IDC, the investment opportunity made complete sense. Bike joins the other 7 big international auto brands that have production facilities in South Africa.
It's export opportunity for South Africa, earning foreign exchange, it's job creation, it's new capacity in the auto sector. We want to grow the auto sector to be more world competitive. So that's why we were very interested as IDC to co-invest with them.
One of the challenges facing the global market is adhering to the country's black economic empowerment rules, which is difficult to do for any of the original equipment manufacturers. It's in the component sector where the work will be done.
Around these OEMs, you've got the local component manufacturers set up, and that's massive. And that's where we want to see the BE happening, the black industrialists, the youth, the women-owned, and we're making huge inroads in that.
There are ambitious plans for the manufacturer, who is planning 50,000 vehicles in phase 1.
We want to go into the whole continent. We've got the free trade agreements, as you know now, so we want to export these vehicles, and then maybe we can move into a phase 2, where we can get to 100,000 vehicles per annum, which is the ultimate goal for us to get to.
South Africa is a place where Bike has placed high expectations and hopes. We're looking forward to playing a role in South Africa.
At 4.5 billion rand, this is the biggest single greenfields investment in the auto sector in the past 40 years, and it augurs well for that sector and for consumers who have more choice. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, here in Kenya, the country's western county of Nakuru is not traditionally a major player when it comes to farming avocado, but the signing of a trade deal between Kenya and China in April is changing that. Nakuru is promoting avocado farming to cash in on the huge market provided by China.
Kenyan avocado exports to China are set to increase by 10% annually over the next 3 years. With the full implementation of a 2018 deal between the two countries,
Kenya will export avocado to China. The deal also includes providing seedlings to farmers who cannot afford it to facilitate for large volumes of the butterfruit.
In Nakuru County, we are assisting the farmers to access avocado seedlings for planting. Seedlings are expensive. One is about 300 shillings. So we have set aside some funds to assist the farmers access the seedlings. For example, this year, 2019, and we are able to distribute 113,000 seedlings growing among our small-scale farmers in the county.
According to the Kenyan government, Chinese traders are actively scouting for new opportunities in the Kenyan market to get avocados, and farmers are happy to have access to the new market.
When Kenya and China we start selling to China, I think it will be a big market, and it will give us a breakthrough where we can sell our commodity. So we appreciate the offer.
Although there's a 3-year wait before they can reap the rewards, the farmers are excited about the project.
I'm going to spread that information to my fellow colleagues, youths, maybe through social media, so that that initiative will get to many people here. I'm planning to plant 200 next year.
Currently, Kenya's famous avocado destinations include Europe and the USA. Experts say that when the agreement is fully implemented, the Chinese market will take in more than 40% of Kenya's avocado produce, making it one of the largest importers of the fruit, and subsequently improving the living standards of farmers.
But more importantly, at the local level, we are seeing massive improvement in economic sustainability. People will have little more money, therefore, we raise the living standards. People can go to school, can be able to feed themselves, and so on and so forth. So there'll be better quality of life. So that as we see the big roads done by some of our Chinese contractors, we also can see economies or people or communities that are coming up, so that the relationship is both ways.
Currently, Nakuru County is establishing an industrial center in Naivasha. In the future, after grading and packaging, the refrigerated containers of avocados can be sent directly to Mombasa and then on to China. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Time for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. A black South African wine owner shakes up a white male-dominated industry.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To South Africa now, where a young black female entrepreneur is pushing boundaries in the white male-dominated wine industry. 3 years ago, Cape Town winemaker Janine Peterson launched her own wine company. CGTN's Travis Andrews has her story.
It's been a good year for J9 Wine's Merlot and Merlot Cabernet blend. Not just are they good on the palate and full of fruit, but some critics have also lauded it. It's down to the persistence and tenacity of the winery's owner, Janine Peterson, who's walked the long and often lonely road of establishing a black-owned wine company in South Africa. The industry is tough, even for established players, but Janine was determined to see through her dream.
I took out all my savings out of my bank account, and then I liquidated some of my assets. One of my biggest ones were my car that I had to sell to start my business. And yeah, I made the sacrifices that I had to make to make this happen.
Today, though, she's taken on a partner to further drive her business, especially the international marketing side, which can bring in much-needed revenue to keep the winery operational. The J9 wine range consists of 4 different varietals, including wines that are now being considered for listings by fairly large companies. The range is especially popular with the up-and-coming market.
We know that the younger crowd is coming in with a deeper appreciation. Our wine, again, like I said, is easy drinking. It's for the adventure-hearted. It's something you want to pop open when you come home from a stressful day at work, or just have a little barbecue, I should say. In South Africa, we say a braai.
The industry, though, does not come without its challenges, including the lack of facilities and financing available to the business. But fortunately, they've managed to secure a partnership to get their wines bottled and into the market. Now, even against adversity, J9 Wines has managed to create 2 award-winning wines for 2019. But they've got even bolder ambitions for the future. That's tapping into what is now becoming the most important wine-consuming nation in the world, where wine e-commerce has grown tremendously.
Currently, the Chinese market is one of the most important for us. It is part of our 5-year plan, and we really want to invest quite a bit of time in China to find the right partner, of course, as well as to grow relations within China.
And the winery believes securing just 1% of that Chinese market will not only make them a sustainable company that can further their footprint, but also a force to be reckoned with within the industry for many years to come. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And coming up in your sports news, up next.